thanks for coming out. I understand everyone's in the midst of tests, and I remember how that was. It's hard to get out, so I appreciate just all of you being here tonight. It's wonderful to be back. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since I started at UNL. I graduated high school from Lincoln Southeast in 1997 and started as a freshman here at UNL in 1997. So 20 years seems like a long time to me, although in some ways it seems like just yesterday. I know a lot has changed here at the university, and when my mom and I were coming up here, we had to ask for directions on how to find this because the auditorium wasn't here back when I was a student here. And I have a lot of wonderful, fond memories of being here at the university. So today, before I start, I have a little disclaimer for all of you. I've been on maternity leave for the last 3 months. I had a baby in August, so I've been a little bit in mom mode. So hopefully you can cut me some slack. And I haven't been working. I still have 1 more month of maternity leave until I go back. So I might be a little bit rusty. So hopefully you'll bear with me on that. So tonight I want to just give you a little bit of my story about where I come from, how I got to where I am today, the type of work that I do, and then I'd like to be able to share some stories with you about how my experiences here at UNL I feel like really shaped my career path and gave me a really strong foundation for the work that I'm able to do today. So with that being said, as Lauren mentioned, I'm a member of the Ponca Tribe of Nebraska. I'm also Santee Sioux. I descend from Chief Smokemaker from the Ponca Tribe, and my great-grandfather was the last chief of the second rank of the Ponca Tribe. My grandmother served on our tribal council, and my aunt served on our tribal council, and my mother has been the executive director of the Nebraska Indian Commission for the last 22 years. So I have a strong history of tribal leadership in my family, and I feel like one of the most important things is knowing where you come from in order to help you see where you can go in life. So I'm very fortunate to still have strong ties to my family and to my community. So it was wonderful to be able to come back here to UNL. I also have a 4-year-old son, and so it's always good to come back and see Grandma and our family. That's a great, I could mix business and pleasure here as well. And my son's 4, he's very talkative, very outgoing, and I asked him, I said, what should Mommy talk about at this talk? And he said, well, you should talk about caring about Mother Earth. You should talk about Chief Standing Bear, which I'll do later. And you should talk about Indians, and then more Indians. So I'm clearly, teaching him a lot at home. He also has strong political views, so we may watch a little bit of too much CNN at home. I'll try not to bring any of my political views here tonight, but those were his recommendations. So I will try and work that a little bit into my speech as well. I mentioned that I, graduated from Lincoln Southeast. I actually noticed one of my 8th grade teachers is here in the audience, Mr. Nelson, so I want to give a little shout out to him. It's wonderful to see him here. But I graduated from Lincoln Southeast in 97, and I started here in 2000, or I started here in 97 and then graduated in 2001. And I always knew that I wanted to do some type of work with Native people. Obviously, I had a lot of members in my family, as I mentioned, that had been involved in tribal issues. And I thought that the path that I would go down would be social work. So I majored in sociology, I had a minor in Spanish, I had a minor in Native American Studies, and I took a lot of sociology classes. But one of the classes that I took, I think it was the end of my junior year, was a constitutional law class with Professor Combs. And I have to say that was really, I think, a defining moment in my life. As you're going through, you're all young and, you may not even realize this as you're a student now. But when you look back on things, you remember what were some defining moments in your life. And I think taking that constitutional law class, which wasn't really within my major, was something that opened my eyes up to what the law could mean for everyone, and especially Native people, on a day-to-day basis. And so when I took the constitutional law class, I started to think, okay, maybe I should pursue law school. And I didn't really know what that entailed, but I had a lot of strong support system and professors that really encouraged me to pursue law. So I started studying for the LSAT. I talked to one of the students earlier. She's getting ready to take the LSAT. And I studied for the LSAT. I took that. And then I went to this program down in New Mexico. It's called the Pre-Law Summer Institute. I don't know if there's any Native students in the audience, but it's a program for Native students, and it's been going on for 40 years. We just had the 40-year anniversary of the program. And it's intended to help recreate your first semester or first year of law school in a short 8-week period down in New Mexico at the university. You have real law school professors, you take real law school classes, you take midterms, final exams, all of that. And that was, in addition to taking the constitutional law class, my experience taking or participating in the Pre-Law Summer Institute was by far another defining moment that I didn't necessarily even know was happening at the time. While I was there, I did well in the program, studied hard. Law school is stressful and hard, and so them putting that into an 8-week program was pretty intense. I met a lot of great other Native students there, and we were all a great support system to each other. But what was really important about the program was that different law schools would come down there to recruit Native students to their programs. So while I was there, I interviewed with Columbia Law School, Cornell, Georgetown, GW, and the University of Washington in St. Louis, and I was admitted to all of those programs. The only catch was that the program ended at the very beginning of August, and school started in about 2 weeks after that. So I had to make a really quick decision. Was I going to leave Nebraska and my home, my family? I'd never left home except to go to this Pre-Law Summer Institute down in New Mexico. And was I going to take a risk and go somewhere else, or I just didn't know if I had the strength to do that. But I talked it over with my family, and we decided that Columbia was a great opportunity for me to do. I was the first member of my tribe to ever go to law school, as far as I know. That's what I've been told, and the first person to graduate from law school. So I went to Columbia, which, if you're familiar with it, it's in New York City. It's right up near Harlem. It's like 5 blocks south of Harlem. And to say it was a culture shock is, I'm not exaggerating. It was really crazy showing up. I had $100 in my pocket and nowhere to live because it was such short notice to go there. The university was still trying to find me housing, and luckily there were 2 other Native students that were there already, and one of them was kind enough to let me stay at his place, and his name was Brossy. Well, I had told my mom, I'm going to be staying with Brossy when I get there. He'll, pick me up. Well, she thought Brossy was Josie, a girl. Turns out it's a 6'5" Native guy, and I was going to be staying in his apartment. So she was a little bit shocked about that once he showed up. And he didn't pick me up at the airport. I just had to get a cab at LaGuardia and go to his apartment, and it was really overwhelming. Luckily, there was one other student that had gone to the Pre-Law Summer Institute with me, a Navajo student who we had become really good friends, and him and his wife were also coming to the program. So I had a little bit of a support system, but it was a lot. And the people in Nebraska are just such wonderful, friendly, down-to-earth people, and New York City is quite different. And law students in general are quite different. I think everyone's used to being kind of the top of their class or go-getters, very typically type A personalities. And so when I got there and met all these people, I just thought, I just don't know if I belong here. And I remember calling up my mom. It was like the first week of when classes had started, and I was crying, and I said, I don't know if I can do this. And she said, well, I know if you can do this, but if you want to come home, we understand that too. But I stuck it out, and I thought, my tribe, my people, we were forcibly removed from Nebraska all the way down to Oklahoma in the late 1800s. They walked 500 miles in the cold and 500 miles back in the cold. And if they could do that, I could go to law school in New York City for a few years. And I did. And it was very hard. I don't know if there's any current law students in the audience today. But I think what they say is, the first year of law school, they scare you to death. The second year, they work you to death. And the third year, they bore you to death. So the first year definitely scared me. It's a lot of work, a lot of reading. You've got 20 to 30 pages of reading per class, per night. And they teach the Socratic method, where the professor's going to he'll pick someone out of the audience. You have no idea who's going to be picked. And they'll just sit there and hound you could be the whole class, could be 10 minutes, could be one minute. You never know. So it was stressful, and it was a lot of work. But by the end of my first year, I had met a lot of people that I felt were really supportive, a great group of friends. And by the second year, I was busy on the Human Rights Law Review, and I had worked over the summer at a small boutique firm in DC practicing Indian law. So I was feeling like I was getting my, wits about me, and I was feeling a little bit more confident about things. So by second year, it was true. They definitely worked you to death, and you had a lot more work. And then by the third year, it was a little bit, you really kind of knew what you were doing. Typically in law school, most people, their summer between their second and third year, they'll work somewhere, and then they'll get an offer after that to then go work once you graduate. And I had worked at this small boutique firm called Santee Chambers in DC. I had worked there the summer after my 1L year, and then the summer after my 2L year. And they gave me an offer to work there after graduation. I had also worked at this other law firm called Hughes, Hubbard & Reed, which is a huge law firm in New York City. And they did a small bit of Indian law, but they couldn't guarantee that I was going to be able to work on that full time. So I said, okay, I'm going to DC, and I'm going to work at this firm that just does Indian law. And it was a wonderful, wonderful firm. I worked there for about a year and a half, and then I had the opportunity to move over to the current firm where I'm at right now, which is Aiken Gump, Strauss, Hauer & Feld. And it's a huge firm in Washington, D.C. We have offices all over the country and all over the world, actually. We originally started out in Texas, but our DC office is one of our largest. I'm in the larger public law and policy group, which is the largest lobbying shop in DC. And then within that is the American Indian Law and Policy group. And there's about 8 to 10 of us. We have 2 consultants that live out in Arizona, and we do work on behalf of tribes and tribal enterprises and different tribal entities, mostly tribal governments. One of our biggest clients is the Gila River Indian community down in Arizona, and we've been working for them for about, I think it's 20 years now. And we'd passed their Indian water settlement back in 2004. That was before I had gotten over there. But they were kind of the biggest tribal client that we started with, and then as the years progressed, we developed other clients. So now we have clients in California, we had some in Montana, Oklahoma, New York, Maine, Arizona, as I mentioned, just kind of all over the country. Alaska, we represent tribes from everywhere. And I feel very fortunate to work in this group because it's the largest lobbying shop in DC. And so we have a lot of bipartisan representation. We've got the Democrats and the Republicans. So we're really well positioned to represent any type of issue that could come up. And with Indian law, it's kind of a little bit of everything. It's not just lobbying that we do. We do litigation, we do administrative work, we do a lot of lobbying. I have to register as a lobbyist and wear the scarlet L, but we do just a little bit of everything, which is nice. So I'll go into that a little bit more, but before I bore you guys to tears here with my story, I'm going to walk around a little bit and break things up and do a short little quiz. And you're not going to get graded here, but if you think you know the answer, you can shout it out, and if not, I'll tell you. It's just a few questions, just to kind of mix things up a little bit. So how many federally recognized Indian tribes do you think there are in the United States? Does anyone have a guess?
300.
More.
5.
A little bit more.
7.
567 are federally recognized tribes. Now, that's not state recognized tribes. There's also state recognized tribes that haven't been recognized either historically, or they haven't gone through the process to get federally recognized. A lot of those are small villages in Alaska, so that includes Alaska and then the lower 48. So 567, that's a new thing. All right, does anyone know how many tribes are located or headquartered here in Nebraska? Close, there's 4. There's the Ponca Tribe, there is the Omaha Tribe, the Winnebago, and the Santee Sioux. But I was asking my mom earlier, and I said, well, how many tribes were historically here in Nebraska? And I didn't even know the answer to that, which I should. But I think we said there were 27. So 27 tribes were traditionally here in Nebraska, which was something new that I had learned. Okay, one more question. Do you know when Native Americans became citizens? Anyone know the date? Very good, yeah, the Citizenship Act of 1924. My high school professor knew the answer to that, so that's fitting. So that was just a little, I just wanted to kind of, give you a little, a few questions just to think about, things that we may not necessarily know the answer to, and I think it's always good to ask questions and think outside the box and learn more about your surroundings here and what's going on in Nebraska. Okay, so we did the quiz. Now let's see. I'll go back to a little bit more about what I do. My clients typically refer to me as a water nerd or a water geek, and I take that with all honor as can be, because I mainly do tribal water law. And a lot of people say, well, what does that entail? What is tribal water law? It usually entails some type of lawsuit that started many, many years ago, decades ago. And it involves, the United States has a trust responsibility to Indian tribes. And when reservations were created, there was the premise that along with that creation of the reservation, that you would have enough water to provide for your homeland now and into the future. The problem is, throughout these years, a lot of other entities, states, local governments, individuals, they took the water that was supposed to be protected by the United States on behalf of Indian tribes. There's a very unique status that tribes in the United States hold. The United States has a trust responsibility to Indian tribes, and this dates back to decades, well, hundreds of years ago of legal precedent. And as part of that is this water law trust responsibility to provide enough water. So it starts out usually in litigation, where a tribe has not been able to get their water rights, or they want to clarify their water rights once and for all. And as I mentioned, we had done work for the Gila River Indian Community in 2004 to get their Indian water settlement. And it involved, I think, over 22 different parties, states, local communities, the tribe, other tribes, and they ended up with 653,000 acre feet of water. So what is an acre foot of water? Well, it's enough to be able to irrigate an acre of land. And so in Arizona, which if you're familiar with Arizona, that is a very dry state, and water is like gold. And the community has been able to use that water settlement that they passed in 2004 to really help grow their economic development. And I know a lot of people, when they think about Indian tribes, what's the first thing that pops into their mind? Gaming. That's all, we have Indian casinos. We don't have any here. Well, we do have some in here in Nebraska, but not like the big, what we call it Class 3 gaming that you would see in Vegas, like the table games. We do have, Omaha and Winnebago have Class 2 facilities. But most people, I think of Indian tribes and they think of Indian gaming. And we certainly do a lot of that work. But Indian water rights have really been a place where tribes are able to take control of their water resources, like the Gila River Indian community, and build that into an economic development where they're able to market their water, they're able to come up with new agreements with their local communities to sell the water. And so it's really been a great way to diversify their economic opportunities. Now, if I were to tell you that there was a place where you have to haul your water for miles away, then once you get the water to your place, you have to boil it before you're able to drink it, I doubt you'd think that we're talking about somewhere here in the United States. But sadly, that is the case for a lot of Indian tribes. One of the tribes that I worked on that was mentioned in my bio was one of the largest Indian water settlements was the Crow Water Settlement, and they're located in Montana. There's tons of water in Montana. It's not like Arizona or California where you're having this scarce supply of this resource, but they had still been, the United States had failed to protect their water, and as a result, they had to haul the water and they had to boil the water in order for it to really be able to be drinkable. And not only that, but they had never had a clean drinking water system that was across the whole reservation. So we started working for the tribe. Their settlement started in litigation similarly back decades ago, and they were able to come to an agreement with the state of Montana in 1999. We started representing them in 2007, and the way that an Indian water settlement typically works is that you start out in litigation and then you try to settle the litigation with the United States. As I mentioned, they have this trust responsibility. So in exchange for us waiving our claims, the tribe waiving their claims against the United States provides a monetary contribution through legislation that then allows the tribe to get what we call wet water. Now, there's been some tribes that have just litigated their water rights in court, and then that results in what we call a paper water right. So you have a piece of paper that says, I have, this tribe has an amount of water that is confirmed and quantified, but they don't have any way they have no funds or no means to be able to get the wet water. They just have this paper. And in comparison, if you settle the the litigation, and then you get a piece of legislation through Congress, then you have this wet water and you have funds that the United States has provided that allows you to actually bring water to the tribal communities. And that's what we did with the Crow Water Settlement. We passed that in 2010. And if you follow politics, not a lot gets done out in DC. It is very difficult to get anything passed in Congress, let alone a $460 million water settlement for an Indian tribe. We packaged our Indian water settlement up with 3 other Indian water settlements and this larger trust accounting case called the Cobell Settlement that was more about individual Indians and the United States failure to take account of it's like a trust accounting account for the money that they were supposed to be handling on behalf of individual Indians. So we packaged that all up together. It was over $1 billion, and we passed that in 2010. And ever since then, we were in the process of implementing the water settlement. So anyone thinking about going to law school, I certainly did not set out to be a water lawyer, but it has great job security because these water settlements take forever. You have to litigate them, then you settle them, then you implement them. So they literally take decades and decades of work, and there's not that many people that practice Indian water law, so you have a lot of opportunities there. So I would recommend you to keep an open mind. Water law is very interesting. It's not boring. And so with the Crow Water Settlement, it was $460 million, and over $200 million of that was to create a clean drinking water system for the first time on the reservation. There was $130 million of it that was to rehabilitate their irrigation system. And then there were funds for energy projects and then upkeeping. So let's say you create this clean drinking water system and you have an irrigation system. Well, over time, it starts to fall apart. You need operation, maintenance, and repair costs. So there's also funding in there to keep the systems running. And we were able to get through the majority of the requirements just this last year. And then for the next probably 10 years, they'll be in the process of building and constructing the clean drinking water system and the irrigation system. I also recently worked on another Indian water settlement on behalf of the Pechanga Band of Listeño Indians. They're located in Southern California, which, unlike Montana, not very much water down there. And they're located a little bit outside of San Diego. We were able to pass their water settlement. It had been pending in Congress since 2008. And we passed it on the very last day of Congress. And it was only, I say only, but in terms of how these water settlements are, it was only 28.5 million. So that's teeny tiny compared to some of these others that are 460 million or whatnot. And it only called for 4,000 acre feet of water in comparison to, say, the Gila River one that was 653,000, and the Crow water settlement was 800,000 acre feet of water. So the Pechanga one, you would think 4,000 acre feet of water, 28.5 million, oh, it should be a breeze. But sadly, that isn't the case. That isn't how things work out in DC, and there's a lot of, it takes a lot to get a piece of legislation passed. But we got it done, like I said, on the very last day of Congress, and we've been in the midst of doing all the implementation work on that one as well. So that's kind of really the last two Indian water settlements that I've worked on, and we'll be doing a lot of the implementation for Pechanga in the years to come, hopefully a little bit quicker than we had to do with Crow just because of the size element of it. And I think that's all I was really going to say about water law. So that probably brings me to how did my experiences here at UNL shape where I ended up, and how did it create a foundation for me of getting me to where I am today. I know we all have different paths, different journeys, how we get somewhere. My mom always likes to say showing up is half the battle, or more than half the battle. So all of you that showed up, thanks, you're on your way through the battle. But one thing that I did was I was a member of Alpha Chi Omega sorority when I was here. And I was the first member of my family to ever join a sorority, or the Greek system. And that was, I didn't know what to expect joining a sorority. I was the only Native American student that I know of that was in the sorority at the time. And I know there is a Native American sorority that I don't know if they have a chapter here at UNL. They didn't have a chapter here when I was here. But I joined Alpha Chi Omega and my freshman year, and then by your sophomore year, you move into the sorority, and it's the first time you live with 50 other women. Well, that in itself is a huge experience and something that helps you grow to learn how to work with other people and negotiate different things. So I think living with 50 other women, that was really helped build a strong foundation. The other thing that I'll say that I think really helped me was running for an office in the sorority. And the way the elections would work is you'd have to get up in front of 100 of your friends and give a speech to be on the executive board. And back then, I mean, I was petrified of doing public speaking. I remember getting up there and I was practically in tears. I was shaking, and it was terrible. I did a horrible job. And not to say that I'm great at public speaking now, but I have to do a lot of public speaking in my job. I'm not an attorney that's necessarily in the courtroom, but when we do these water settlements, we have to go out back to the tribal communities and explain to their membership, what does this settlement mean to you? And with Crow, we had to have a majority of the tribal membership vote in favor of the water settlement. So I had to go out to every single tribal community on the reservation. Their reservation's 2.3 million acres wide there in Montana, and go to all the tribal communities and speak to them about, here's what the water settlement does, here's what it doesn't do. There was a lot of gossip about, we're selling our water rights, this is terrible, we're giving our water rights away again. And so we really had to do a lot of education, but I had to get up in front of all these tribal members, some of whom I knew, but a lot of who I didn't. And a lot of them were angry. They weren't necessarily sure about what did this water settlement mean. So I think being in the sorority and having to speak in front of people was a great learning experience for me, and something that helped build a foundation. So I would encourage all of you, if you're not in a sorority, if you're in some other type of organization that gives you the option or the opportunity to work on your public speaking skills, to take advantage of that. That was one thing that I really appreciated looking back on it, was helped me to be where I am today was being in Alpha Chi Omega, and then really having that strong sisterhood of support, but also just, having to take risks to get out there and do things that you're not necessarily feel comfortable doing. And looking back, I probably should have prepared a lot more for my speeches, and that would have helped me out more, but, hindsight is 20/20. The other thing that I did when I was at the university was I tried to do a wide variety of different jobs, and not necessarily a job that was going to pay the most money, but something that was going to not only give me experience, but also really help build my resume. And I remember thinking, I'm a type A personality. I'm thinking, what am I going to do the next 3 steps ahead? And at that time I was thinking, okay, I needed to do this job, and then I needed to do that job. And I started working for my tribe, and that was a wonderful experience to get to know a lot of people in my community better and to see what are the issues that are really affecting my people. I worked in our Lincoln office, which is right over on 17th and E. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Ponca Tribe, we were originally located up near Niobrara, Nebraska, and we were terminated in the 1960s, and then restored by an act of Congress in 1990. So we've really only been restored since 1990, and we were restored without a reservation. Most tribes have a reservation base, and the Ponca Tribe does not have a reservation. One of the congressmen, it was his requirement that in order to get this bill passed, that we'd have to have a specific provision in the act that said no reservation land. We can have trust land taken on behalf of the tribe, but we could not have a reservation. So instead, we have what are called service sites, where a large group of our tribal members live. So we have offices in Omaha, Lincoln, Norfolk, Carter Lake, and I may be forgetting one. But so we're kind of have these offices where a lot of our tribal members live, and I worked at the one here in Lincoln, so that was a great experience. Then I worked as a page for the Nebraska Unicameral, and that was my first time that I really was involved in politics or seeing what the political system was. And Nebraska is so unique that we have this unicameral system to begin with which no other state has. But just to see how senators were approaching different bills, how they were working to gain support for their side, and having speeches on the floor, it was a real eye-opener to me, to the political process. And I think that really sparked a lot of interest in pursuing that type of political work down the road, which is a lot of what I do now, going to different fundraisers, meeting with members on the Hill on behalf of issues that I work on for my tribal clients. And I loved being a page. I don't think it pays a whole lot, but if you're still at the university now, being a page is a wonderful experience, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And the other place that I worked was my senior year. I worked for a law firm here in Lincoln called Klein Williams, and I was a legal runner, just running different errands around, taking things to get filed in court. And that was a wonderful experience because I got to see what it really means to be a lawyer on a day-to-day basis. And I think we all have these ideas about, if you've seen shows on TV that The Good Wife or Law and Order or things like that, where you're in the courtroom and you're doing these things. And that's not necessarily a lot of the practice. That's the great thing about being a lawyer. I encourage all of you to consider pursuing the law, because it's not just about being in the courtroom. I'm certainly not in the courtroom, but having a legal degree and being a lawyer opens the doors up for so many other opportunities. You don't just have to practice law. I think having that legal training really gives you a strong foundation of what you can do. And I worked there that summer before I went to the Pre-Law Summer Institute, and it was really, really wonderful. And then I went to the Pre-Law Summer Institute and worked in law firms. So I think thinking about, okay, what is it that I'm going to do? What can I do to really build my resume? What do I want to do that is going to translate into whatever you want to pursue? And I think that's the biggest thing that I would recommend, is finding something that you're really passionate about. I always knew since I was little that I wanted to do some type of Native American law, or not Native American law, but to work on behalf of Native American people. And there's so many different ways that you can do that. But having that passion or that strong connection is what really drives drives me and helps me get up every day to go to work. As I mentioned, I have a 4-year-old and I have a 3-month-old. And so getting up and going to work, it's hard to leave my kids at home. And it's not easy being a working mom, especially at a big firm in DC. We're expected to do a lot of hours. Billable hours is what they're called. Luckily, my firm's very supportive. We have a great maternity policy. I've been able to be on maternity now for, well, it will be 4 months. And then once I go back, I work and then try and leave the office a little bit early, like around 5:30 or 6, that's early. Go home, help out with the, get the kids to bed, and then get back online and do more work. So it's not easy. And as one of the attorneys in my firm mentioned, what a female partner said, she said, women can have it all. We may just not be able to have it all at once. And for me, that has been true. I think I can definitely have it all, but I'm putting my family as a priority, and I think as it will come, partnership will come down the road. So you really have to look at what works for you and what are you passionate about, and how does that translate into your world. The last thing that I want to leave you with, because I think I've probably talked your ears off, and I think there's supposed to be a time here. Am I doing okay on time?
At the end.
Okay, I'm at the end. I want to put in a challenge to you, or a personal plug. I don't know if any of you have been down over on Centennial Mall lately by the journalism school, but just a few weeks ago, my mother was working on a project to have the Chief Standing Bear Memorial put in there, and it's a beautiful sculpture. The artist is Ben Victor, and it's a beautiful sculpture of Chief Standing Bear. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Chief Standing Bear, that's my challenge to you, is to go out and learn the story of Chief Standing Bear. He's a chief from my tribe, the Ponca Tribe. And I'll give you just a snapshot of the story. And then I put it on you to go and see the sculpture and then also learn more about the story. But it was in the late 1800s during the Indian removal, where they were going to move our tribe down to Oklahoma. I mentioned they had walked down 500 miles. And along the way, Chief Standing Bear's son, Bear Shield, passed away, and his dying wish to his father was that he would be buried in his homelands. And Chief Standing Bear said, "Son, I will do that, and I'll bury you in your homelands in Niobrara." So he took 30 members of the tribe and walked all the way back, 500 miles back. And along the way, they were stopped and detained by the Army in Omaha. And there was a trial where, for the first time, the court found that Indians are human beings within the meaning of the law. And that was in 1879. And the Ponca Tribe, we were allowed to go back to our homelands. We didn't really have any land at the time, so we had to go through a long process of getting land restored there. But it's a very powerful story. I think it's a story about resilience and love for your family. And as Nebraskans, I think we can all really relate to that. And I'll leave you with that to look into that story more, other stories that happened here in Nebraska. And I think all of you that are students here, you're getting a great education at UNL. It really does provide a wonderful foundation for your future. And I wish you all the best, and I'm open to any questions that you might have. Yes. We haven't had any tribes that here approach us, but there's always the possibility. I know there's a lot that are pending or that are coming up in Oklahoma. There's a bunch in New Mexico. There's always a lot in California. But I haven't heard too many that have really raised Indian water settlements to us. I know the pipeline has been a very controversial topic that's a lot of people have been following here.
Great story, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yes?
Have you ever thought about running for public office?
Oh, goodness. Probably not, although I wouldn't close the door to it. My husband's probably more apt to do that. He is the executive director for the Navajo Nation in DC. They have their main office is out in Arizona, but they have an office in DC, and he's the head of that. And I think he has more political aspirations than I do, but I wouldn't close the door to it. But it's a grind. Yeah.
So obviously, Columbia Law School, very prestigious school, obviously not cheap.
Yeah.
I don't expect you to divulge any
No, I think that's a great question, because that is one thing that a lot of students ask me when they're considering, okay, I got into X, Y, and Z school, where would you recommend I go? And so I always recommend that you go to the top rated school where you get the most money. I didn't get a ton of money from Columbia, and I know, let's see, I graduated there in 2005, so that was, over 12 years ago. And inflation, the cost of school there is even more. I think they covered a year of my tuition. So I still came out of Columbia with over $100,000 worth of debt. And to me, it was worth it. But that does coming out with that amount of debt, it limits your ability to work at certain jobs. Columbia had a great public interest repayment plan as well, that if you went into certain sectors or jobs, that they would help you pay back your loans over like a 10-year period. They had a scholarship at Columbia, which I think they've used all the money up now, but I received the scholarship there that helped you pay off your loans over a 10-year period if you were going into Indian law. Someone had gifted a sizable donation to the school. So there are, opportunities like that, but that is a big factor to consider if you are going to law school, because just having that debt, and I know it's even more expensive than it was back then, it does limit the type of work that you can go into. So that's a good question. Anyone else?
Do you do any work for tribes in Nebraska, pro bono?
Oh, thanks, Mom. I do. That's another great thing about my firm. It's one of these large law firms that has very large billable rates, but we also really support pro bono work. And so I've been able to do, I helped revise my tribe's law and order code, and I'm also working on a trail bill to try and establish the Chief Standing Bear Trail from Nebraska down to Oklahoma as a federal designation through the National Park Service. We've passed the bill on the House now twice. Congressman Fortenberry has been wonderful and very supportive of the bill, and we haven't gotten as far on the Senate side. So we're still trying to get that passed, but those are two issues that I've worked on pro bono. Thanks, Mom. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much for all coming out, and I'm happy to, talk on a more smaller scale basis when we go over for cookies or whatnot. But thanks again.